Okay, so you want to own an EV charging station, install some chargers, sell electricity at a markup, and collect passive income while cars plug in around the clock. Sounds like the gas station business of the future, and the future genuinely needs this infrastructure. But here's the strange part. The three largest publicly traded charging companies in America, Blink, ChargePoint, and EVgo, posted combined net losses of more than $600 million in a single recent year. Not combined losses over a decade. In 1 year. These are the biggest, best-funded names in the entire industry, and none of them are reliably profitable. And here's the part that should really give you pause. One of those companies, ChargePoint, went public through a SPAC merger in 2021, promising a business model tested over more than a decade. Its stock has since fallen more than 96% from its peak. It's racked up nearly $1.9 billion in accumulated losses. Its CEO and CFO were both forced out. This wasn't a scrappy startup that ran out of runway. This was the company that operates the single largest charging network in the country. By the end of this video, you'll know exactly what it costs to install a charging station, why the economics are so much harder than a gas pump, why even the industry's biggest players keep losing money at scale, and what it actually takes to build a station that genuinely turns a profit. The two types of charger, and why the costs are so different. EV charging comes down to two fundamentally different products wearing the same name. Level 2 chargers are the slower, cheaper option, the kind you'd install at a workplace, hotel, or retail parking lot where cars sit for hours anyway. Hardware and installation typically run $2,500 to $20,000 per port, depending on whether your site already has adequate electrical capacity. A busy Level 2 port can gross around $1,200 to $1,800 a month. And because the upfront cost is so low, that modest revenue can still produce a genuinely attractive return. DC fast chargers are the other product entirely, the kind drivers actually want on a highway corridor, delivering an 80% charge in 20 to 40 minutes instead of several hours. That speed comes at a steep price. Full installation, including hardware, transformer work, trenching, and utility interconnection, commonly runs $90,000 to $200,000 per port, with some high-power stations exceeding that. A well-located, well-utilized fast charger can gross $3,000 to $5,000 a month, sometimes more at premium highway locations. But that revenue has to service a capital cost roughly 10 to 20 times higher than a Level 2 port. Here's the detail that catches nearly every new operator off guard, and it has nothing to do with the charger itself. It's called a demand charge, a separate utility fee based on the single highest burst of power your station pulls from the grid at any moment, regardless of how much electricity you actually sold that month. A single fast charger running at peak output can add somewhere between $2,000 and $14,000 a month in demand charges alone, on top of the electricity you're actually reselling. Miss this cost in your planning, and a station that looks profitable on a spreadsheet can bleed money every single month in the real world. Where the money actually goes, and why the margins are so thin. A charging station makes money by buying wholesale electricity and reselling it at a markup, commonly 30 to 60 cents per kilowatt hour for Level 2, and 40 to 79 cents for DC fast charging. On the surface, that looks like a straightforward retail markup business, similar in shape to a gas station. Here's the trick that makes it fundamentally harder. A gas pump costs roughly $20,000 to install. A DC fast charger costs up to 15 times that, and unlike gasoline, wholesale electricity pricing swings by time of day and by how much peak demand your station creates, meaning your input cost isn't fixed the way it is for a fuel retailer. Industry benchmarks suggest a charging site needs a minimum utilization rate of around 15% just to break even, with anything below 5% typically losing money outright. For context, most fast charging stations installed today, particularly outside major highway corridors, sit well under that threshold for years while EV adoption slowly catches up to the infrastructure being built ahead of it. This is the part that breaks people's brains the same way a rigged casino game breaks a gambler's brain. You're being asked to build expensive, fixed infrastructure today based on a bet about driver demand that may not materialize at your specific location for years. Unlike a coffee shop, you can't easily relocate a $200,000 charging installation to a better corner if you guessed wrong about foot traffic. The capital is sunk into the ground, literally, the moment the trenching work is done. Even at the industry's biggest scale, this math hasn't been solved. Tesla, by far the most successful charging network in the world, controlled nearly 45% of all new charging ports added in a recent quarter, a dominance built over more than a decade, subsidized for years by the profitability of Tesla's core car business, while the charging network itself matured. Every other major operator has been left racing to catch up without that same cushion. Why even the biggest network in the country couldn't escape this? You'd think that scale, brand recognition, and years of head start would eventually make this business reliably profitable. ChargePoint's story shows exactly how stubborn this industry's economics really are. ChargePoint began in 2007 as Coulomb Technologies, writing early federal stimulus grants to build out what became the largest public charging network in the United States, with nearly 43,000 locations by 2025. In 2021, it went public through a SPAC merger, with its CEO confidently declaring the business model tested over more than a decade of operation, backed by roughly $480 million in fresh capital. The losses never stopped. ChargePoint reported net losses of $345 million, $457 million, and $277 million across 3 consecutive fiscal years, building an accumulated deficit of nearly $1.9 billion. Operating cash flow was negative every single year. By late 2023, the stock had fallen more than 96% from its peak, and both the CEO and CFO were forced out. The company still hasn't reliably hit its own long-stated goal of a single profitable quarter on an adjusted basis. Rivals fared little better. EVgo's stock fell from a peak of $18.90 a share to under $3 over the same stretch. And across the Atlantic, established UK charging operators including GridServe, Osprey, and even BP's charging division posted losses in the tens of millions of pounds in their most recent reported years. The lesson isn't that ChargePoint or its rivals were badly managed, even though leadership changes suggest real strategic missteps along the way. It's that building the largest network in the country, with over a decade of head start and hundreds of millions in fresh capital, still wasn't enough to overcome a business where fixed infrastructure costs vastly outpaced the utilization needed to justify them, in a market still years away from the driver volume the industry originally projected. How smaller operators actually lose this money. 3 ordinary patterns explain most failures below the headline-grabbing public companies. Pattern 1. Installing DC fast chargers at unproven locations, chasing government incentives rather than actual driver demand. Federal NEVI funding has subsidized charging infrastructure at an average cost to taxpayers of around $67,500 per port, money that gets a station built, but does nothing to guarantee the 15% utilization rate that station actually needs to survive once the subsidy runs out. Pattern 2. Ignoring demand charges until the first utility bill arrives. Operators who model revenue against a simple per kilowatt-hour markup, without separately modeling the demand charge a fast charger triggers at peak output, routinely discover their real operating cost is thousands of dollars higher per month than their initial business plan assumed. Pattern 3. Underestimating how long the utilization ramp actually takes. EV adoption in most markets is still climbing gradually rather than the steep curve many early operators bet on when they built their sites, which means stations installed ahead of real local demand can spend years operating well below break-even before traffic finally catches up, if it ever does at that specific location. What you actually walk away with. Scenario 1. A small Level 2 deployment, 4 to 6 ports at a workplace or retail site, roughly $40,000 to $60,000 invested. At a modest utilization rate, realistic annual revenue lands around $72,000 to $120,000, with net margins in the 10 to 30% range once electricity, maintenance, and network fees are covered. Call it $7,000 to $36,000 a year in real profit, alongside real indirect value if the chargers are drawing customers into an adjacent retail business. Scenario 2. A well-sited DC fast charging hub on a genuine highway corridor for ports at around $600,000 invested. At the higher utilization rates the best located highway sites can achieve, annual revenue can reach $140,000 to $240,000, but demand charges alone can consume $24,000 to $168,000 of that before other costs. And payback still commonly takes 2.5 to 8 years, even at strong locations with plenty of less fortunate sites never reaching break-even at all. So if you're chasing this business, remember the real rule of this industry. You're not selling electricity. You're making a multi-$100,000 bet on driver demand years before that demand is guaranteed to show up. In a business where even the largest, most experienced operator in the country still hasn't figured out how to turn a reliable profit at scale.